We've never seen men like this. Japanese women POWs couldn't stop staring at Black American soldiers. August 15th, 1945, 11 in the morning, Okinawa, Pacific Theater. The canvas-covered truck lurched to a stop, throwing Yuki Takahashi against the woman beside her. Through the gap in the canvas, she caught her first glimpse of the American prisoner of war camp. Barbed wire stretched endlessly in both directions. Guard towers rose against the brutal Pacific sun. This was where they would die. Yuki had known this moment would come since the morning Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled over the radio, announcing surrender. The war was over. Japan had lost. And now she and 47 other Japanese women, most of them military nurses and comfort station workers captured during the final chaotic weeks, would face American vengeance. The propaganda had been clear. Americans were devils. They would torture prisoners, rape the women, murder them slowly. The stories had filled Japanese newspapers for years. Photographs, carefully selected, showed American soldiers committing atrocities. Radio broadcasts described enemy savagery in graphic detail. Every Japanese citizen knew what happened to those who fell into American hands. The truck's tailgate dropped open with a metallic clang. Yuki squinted against the sudden brightness. A voice called out in broken Japanese, "Come down, slow. No one hurt you." The accent was wrong, the grammar worse, but the words themselves were impossible. No one hurt you. This had to be a trick. Yuki climbed down first. Her legs, cramped from 3 hours in the truck, nearly gave out. She steadied herself against the vehicle's hot metal frame and looked up at the man who had spoken. He was black. She had never seen a black person in real life. The propaganda posters showed them as subhuman, ape-like, dangerous. The Japanese military had taught that Black Americans were the lowest class of an already inferior nation. They were to be feared and despised above all others. But the man standing before her wore a crisp American uniform. 3 stripes on his sleeve marked him as a sergeant. His face showed no cruelty, no hatred. He was simply watching them with what appeared to be concern. "My name, Sergeant Samuel Johnson," he said in his halting Japanese. "You are safe now. War is over." Safe. The word made no sense. Yuki looked past Johnson at the camp. More black soldiers were emerging from the buildings, at least 20 of them, all armed, all watching the truck. This was it. This was where the Americans would reveal their true nature. Miyuki Sato, a woman old enough to be Yuki's mother, climbed down next. She was trembling. Behind her, the other women descended one by one. Several were crying. One girl, barely 18, looked ready to collapse. Sergeant Johnson raised his hand. The gesture made several women flinch, expecting a blow. Instead, he pointed toward a long wooden building. "Please," he said. "You must be very tired, very hungry. We have food, water, place to rest." Yuki translated his words for those who couldn't understand. The women stared at her in disbelief. Food? Water? Rest? These were the promises of propaganda, the lies told before the torture began. But Johnson was already walking toward the building. He moved slowly, checking over his shoulder to ensure they followed. Another soldier, taller and broader, appeared carrying wooden crates. He set them down near the truck and opened one. Inside were canteens filled with water. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. The women didn't move. They couldn't. Everything they had been taught, everything they believed about the enemy, said this was impossible. Black American soldiers showing them kindness. It violated the fundamental order of the universe as they understood it. Johnson picked up one of the canteens. He unscrewed the cap, took a drink himself, then held it out to Yuki. "Please," he said in English, then switched back to his broken Japanese. "You must drink. Very hot today." Yuki reached out slowly. Her fingers brushed his as she took the canteen. His skin was warm, human. The water inside was cold and clean. She drank. The mess hall smelled like nothing Yuki had ever experienced. Real coffee, fresh bread, something cooking that made her empty stomach contract painfully. She hadn't eaten properly in 3 weeks. The Japanese women filed in slowly, each one expecting the kindness to end, expecting the Americans to drop their masks and reveal the monsters underneath. But the black soldiers simply gestured to the long tables and benches. "Sit, please," Private Elijah Green said. He was younger than Johnson, maybe 25, with gentle eyes that seemed permanently sad. "Food comin' soon." The women sat. They kept close together, as if proximity might offer protection. Yuki found herself between Miyuki and a young woman named Hanako, who worked as a radio operator before capture. All 3 of them were staring at their empty plates, unsure what would happen next. The kitchen doors swung open. 2 soldiers emerged carrying large pots. The smell intensified. Rice, vegetables, some kind of meat. The pots were placed on the tables within easy reach. Corporal Henry Fitzgerald, a jovial-looking man with laugh lines around his eyes, began ladling food onto plates. He worked his way down the table, serving each woman. When he reached Yuki, he gave her an extra-large portion. "Growing girl needs her strength," he said in English, then added something in Japanese that sounded like, "Eat well." The plate in front of Yuki held more food than she'd seen in a month. White rice, not the mixture of rice and barley that Japanese civilians had survived on. Green beans, carrots, and meat. Actual meat, not the tiny portions rationed during wartime. "Eat," Johnson said from the end of the table. "No poison. No
trick. Just food."
Hanako picked up her spoon first. She took a small bite of rice, chewing slowly, waiting for something terrible to happen. When nothing did, she took another bite. Then another. Soon, all the women were eating, their suspicion temporarily overwhelmed by hunger. Yuki ate mechanically, her mind trying to process what was happening. The food was good. Better than good. It was abundant. These American soldiers, these black American soldiers whom she'd been taught to hate and fear, were feeding enemy prisoners better than Japan had fed its own soldiers in the final months of the war. Halfway through the meal, Johnson stood and walked around the table. He was checking on each woman, asking if they needed more food or water. When he reached Miyuki, he noticed she was eating very slowly, her movements pained. "You sick?" he asked. Miyuki looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. She didn't understand English. Yuki translated quickly. "My teeth," Miyuki said quietly. "Several are broken. It hurts to chew." Johnson nodded. He disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bowl of soup. The broth was clear and hot, easy to swallow. "Better?" he asked, setting it before her. Miyuki stared at the soup, then at Johnson's face, then back at the soup. Tears began rolling down her cheeks. She couldn't speak. She simply nodded. Yuki felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. The enemy wasn't supposed to notice when an old woman had broken teeth. They weren't supposed to care. They certainly weren't supposed to bring her soup. After the meal, the soldiers led them to the barracks. The building was clean. Each woman received a cot with a thin mattress, a blanket, and a pillow. There were windows that actually opened, a ceiling fan that worked.
At the end of the room stood a door marked with a sign Yuki couldn't read. "Shower," Private Green explained. "Hot water, soap, clean clothes coming soon." Hot water. The luxury of it was almost obscene. Japan's civilians had survived on cold water baths for years. Now, here were prisoners, enemy prisoners, being offered hot showers. That night, lying on her cot in the darkness, Yuki listened to the other women breathing. Some were crying quietly. Others whispered to each other, their voices filled with confusion. "What are they doing?" Hanako whispered from the next cot. "Why are they being kind?" Yuki had no answer. Nothing in her 23 years had prepared her for this. The propaganda had been wrong, or incomplete, or something else she didn't yet understand. Through the window, she could see one of the guard towers. A black soldier stood watch, his silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. He was protecting them, not guarding them, protecting them. The thought terrified her more than cruelty would have. August 16th, 1945, 6:30 in the morning. Yuki woke to the sound of a bugle playing reveille. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then,
Memory crashed back. The camp. The Americans. The impossible kindness that made no sense. The women dressed in silence, wearing their own clothes still. The promised clean uniforms hadn't arrived yet. They filed out of the barracks, uncertain what the day would bring. Sergeant Johnson was waiting outside. In the early morning light, his face looked tired. Yuki realized he'd probably been awake most of the night. Someone had to organize everything: food, housing, supplies for nearly 50 unexpected prisoners. The logistics alone must have been overwhelming. "Good morning," he said in English, then in Japanese. "Today we do medical check. Make sure everyone healthy. Also explain rules of camp." The medical examination was conducted by an older white doctor and 2 black medics. Each woman was checked for injuries, diseases, malnutrition. The process was professional and respectful. No one was asked to undress beyond what was necessary. The doctor spoke gently, explaining each step through Yuki, who found herself serving as unofficial translator. When it was Miyuki's turn, the doctor spent extra time examining her mouth. Her broken teeth were infected. Without treatment, the infection could spread, could kill her. "We fix this," the doctor said firmly. "Tomorrow, dental surgery. She'll need to rest after." Surgery. For a prisoner. For an enemy. Yuki translated the words, and Miyuki began to cry again. After the examinations, Johnson gathered all the women in the mess hall. He stood at the front of the room, holding a small book. The Geneva Convention, Yuki would later learn. The international rules about how prisoners of war should be treated. "You have rights," Johnson said carefully in Japanese. His pronunciation was improving. Someone must have been teaching him. "Right to food, to medical care, to be treated with dignity. We follow these rules. Always." He explained the camp routine. Morning roll call at 7, breakfast at 7:30, work details from 9 to noon, lunch, more work from 2 to 5, dinner at 6, free time until lights out at 10. The work, he explained, would be voluntary: helping in the kitchen, cleaning the barracks, laundry, light gardening. Nothing dangerous or demeaning, nothing that supported the war effort, which was over anyway. "You help us, we pay you," Johnson said. "Small amount, but money is yours. Buy things from canteen if you want." Pay. They would be paid for work. Yuki's mind reeled. Japanese prisoners of war were usually worked to death in mines and factories, unpaid, barely fed.
Here were Americans offering to pay their enemies for light labor. After the briefing, Johnson approached Yuki directly. He'd noticed she spoke English better than the others, had noticed she was translating for everyone. "You could help me," he said. "Official translator. I need someone explain things clearly. My Japanese is terrible." Yuki hesitated. To work with the Americans felt like collaboration, like betrayal. But what was she betraying? A government that had lied to her? A military that had lost the war? "I'll think about it," she said quietly. Johnson nodded. Of course, no pressure. But Yuki. He used her name. She didn't remember telling him. He must have learned it from the prisoner roster. "I know you scared. I know you taught we are monsters. Give us chance to show you truth." That afternoon, Yuki watched Johnson work. He was everywhere at once, checking on the women, organizing supplies, solving problems. When one of the younger prisoners, a girl named Tomoko, had a panic attack, Johnson sat with her until she calmed down. He didn't touch her, didn't force anything. He simply sat nearby, a quiet presence, until the fear passed. The other soldiers followed his example. Private Green helped an elderly prisoner carry her mattress to a different cot, one closer to the window where she could feel the breeze. Corporal Fitzgerald organized a game of cards with some of the women, teaching them an American game called poker, using dried beans instead of money. These men were not the monsters of propaganda. They were soldiers doing their jobs with unexpected humanity. The realization was destabilizing. If the Americans weren't evil, what else had Japan lied about? That evening, after dinner, Johnson found Yuki sitting alone outside the barracks. He sat down nearby, maintaining respectful distance. "Hard day?" he asked. "Every day is hard," Yuki replied in English. "The world is upside down. Everything I knew is wrong." Johnson was quiet for a long moment. "I understand," he said finally. "When I first joined the army, I thought America was perfect, land of the free. Then I learned about segregation, about how my own country treats people like me. Sometimes learning the truth is painful, but it's necessary." Yuki looked at him in the fading light. "You're treated badly? In America?" "We're not allowed in certain places, can't eat in certain restaurants, have to use different bathrooms, different water fountains. The army itself is segregated. Black soldiers in black units." "But you fight for America anyway?" Johnson smiled sadly. "I fight because my people deserve better. Fight to prove we're equal, same as anyone. Maybe someday America will believe it." The honesty was startling. Enemy soldiers weren't supposed to share their vulnerabilities, weren't supposed to reveal their own country's flaws. "Why are you telling me this?" Yuki asked. "Because you need to know we're human," Johnson said simply. "Just like you." August 18th, 1945, 2 in the afternoon. Yuki had been working in the mess hall for 3 days. She'd finally accepted Johnson's offer to serve as official translator. The work gave her purpose, kept her mind occupied, kept her from dwelling on everything she'd lost. She was wiping down tables when Corporal Fitzgerald approached. He was carrying something wrapped in brown paper. "Got something for you," he said with a grin. "Well, for all you ladies. But you get first pick because you're helping us so much." He unwrapped the paper. Inside were chocolate bars, at least 30 of them. Hershey's, the label said. American chocolate. Yuki stared at the bars. Chocolate had been unavailable in Japan for years. Sugar itself was rationed to near nothing. Luxuries like chocolate existed only in memory and propaganda films showing enemy decadence. "Take one," Fitzgerald urged. "Go on, they're good. Promise." Yuki reached out slowly. Her fingers touched the brown wrapper. She pulled her hand back. "What's wrong?" Fitzgerald's smile faded. Oh, I get it. You think it's a trick. Poisoned or something." "No," Yuki said quickly. Then, more honestly, "Maybe. I don't know." Fitzgerald unwrapped one of the bars and broke off a piece. He popped it in his mouth and chewed, making exaggerated sounds of enjoyment. "See? Safe. Delicious. Here." He broke off another piece and held it out. Yuki took it. The chocolate was soft from the heat. It melted on her tongue, sweet and rich. She'd forgotten what chocolate tasted like. "Good?" Fitzgerald asked. She nodded, unable to speak. It was too good, too kind, too confusing. Over the next hour, Fitzgerald distributed chocolate bars to every woman in the camp. Their reactions varied. Some accepted immediately. Others hesitated like Yuki had. One woman, an older nurse named Keiko, refused outright. "I don't want American charity," she said coldly in Japanese. "I don't want anything from them." Fitzgerald didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He simply nodded, placed the chocolate bar on her cot, and walked away. Later that evening, Yuki found Keiko sitting alone, the chocolate bar still unwrapped beside her. The older woman was staring at it like it might bite. "It's just chocolate," Yuki said, sitting down nearby. "Nothing is just anything," Keiko replied. "Every gift comes with expectations. Every kindness has a price." "Maybe. Or maybe they're just being decent." Keiko laughed bitterly. "Decent. We were taught our entire lives that these people are animals. Subhuman, inferior. Now you want me to believe they're being decent?" Yuki had no answer. She was asking herself the same questions. "What if the propaganda was wrong?" she said finally. "What if we were lied to? Then what was it all for?" Keiko's voice broke. "My son died fighting these people. My husband died in the Philippines. If the Americans aren't monsters, if they're just people being decent, then what did my family die for?" The question hung in the air between them. It was the question all of them were avoiding. If the enemy was human, if the enemy was kind, then maybe Japan had been the aggressor. Maybe Japan had been wrong. That night, Yuki lay awake thinking about Fitzgerald's smile as he handed out chocolate, about Johnson's patience when Miyuki cried, about Private Green's gentleness with the younger prisoners. These men had no reason to be kind. They could have been cruel. They could have taken revenge for Pearl Harbor, for Bataan, for every American who died in the Pacific. Instead, they gave away chocolate. The next morning, Keiko's chocolate bar was gone. The wrapper lay neatly folded on her cot. When Fitzgerald came through the barracks on his morning rounds, Keiko stopped him. She couldn't speak English, so she simply bowed. A deep, formal bow that spoke of gratitude and apology. Fitzgerald, who didn't fully understand the gesture's significance, just smiled and patted her shoulder gently. "You're welcome, ma'am," he said. Yuki watched from across the room. Something was changing, not just in Keiko, but in all of them. The walls they'd built from propaganda and hatred were developing cracks. Small ones, but cracks nonetheless. Private Green appeared in the doorway. "Yuki, Sergeant Johnson needs you. Miyuki's dental surgery is today. He wants you there to translate. Keep her calm." Yuki followed Green to the medical building. Inside, Miyuki was sitting in a dentist's chair, trembling.
The white doctor was preparing instruments. Johnson stood nearby, his presence clearly meant to be reassuring. "Tell her it won't hurt much," the doctor said through Yuki. "We have painkillers. Good ones. She'll be much better after." Yuki translated. Miyuki gripped the chair arms so tightly her knuckles went white.
Why?
She asked suddenly.
Why do this for me? I'm nothing, an enemy, an old woman who doesn't matter.
Johnson heard the emotion in her voice, even if he didn't understand the words. "What did she say?" he asked Yuki. Yuki translated. Johnson stepped closer to Miyuki and spoke directly to her, knowing Yuki would interpret. "You matter because all people matter. You matter because suffering is suffering, no matter who's suffering. You matter because my mama taught me to treat everyone with dignity, especially people who can't help themselves." Tears streamed down Miyuki's face as Yuki translated. The old woman reached out and touched Johnson's hand briefly. Just a touch. Then she settled back in the chair and nodded to the doctor. The surgery took 2 hours. Miyuki was brave throughout. When it was over, Johnson stayed with her in the recovery area until she fell asleep. Yuki watched him sitting there, this black American sergeant who'd been taught his whole life that he was inferior, showing more compassion than she'd ever seen from her own superior officers. "Sergeant?" Yuki said quietly. "Thank you for all of this." Johnson looked up. "Don't thank me. This is just basic human decency. Shouldn't be remarkable. Should be normal." But it wasn't normal. That was the problem. In war, kindness was remarkable. Humanity was unexpected. And these black American soldiers were teaching Japanese prisoners what it meant to be human. August 23, 1945. 10 in the morning. The morning started normally. Roll call, breakfast, work assignments. Then Colonel Frank Thompson arrived. Yuki first noticed the change when Johnson's face went hard. The sergeant stood at attention as a white officer climbed out of a jeep. The other black soldiers snapped to attention as well. Their easy manner vanished, replaced by rigid military formality. Colonel Thompson was tall, white-haired, with a face that looked like it was carved from stone. He wore his uniform with parade ground precision. Everything about him spoke of discipline, order, and authority. "Sergeant Johnson," Thompson's voice carried across the compound. "A word." Yuki watched from the mess hall doorway. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read body language. Thompson was angry about something. Johnson was responding calmly, but his shoulders were tense. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, Thompson strode toward the prisoner barracks. Johnson followed, his expression worried. "Ladies," Thompson announced in crisp English, waiting for Yuki to translate. "I am Colonel Thompson. I will be conducting an inspection of this facility. I have concerns about the operation here." He walked through the barracks slowly, examining everything. The cots, the windows, the cleanliness. He said nothing, but his face showed disapproval. In the mess hall, he watched as Fitzgerald served lunch to the prisoners. When the corporal gave one woman an extra serving of rice, Thompson's eyes narrowed. Back in the compound, he confronted Johnson. This time, Yuki was close enough to hear. "Sergeant, these prisoners are being treated with excessive leniency. I've observed your men engaging in friendly conversation with enemy combatants. I've seen them giving away rations. This is inappropriate." "Sir, with respect, we're following Geneva Convention protocols." Johnson's voice was careful, controlled. "The prisoners are being treated humanely, as required by international law." "Humane treatment does not mean friendship, Sergeant. It does not mean extra rations. These women are enemies of the United States. They should be reminded of that fact. They're prisoners, sir, not enemies. The war is over. Thompson's face reddened. The war is over when I say it's over, Sergeant. You will instruct your men to maintain proper distance from prisoners. No more casual conversations. No more special treatment. No more gifts. Is that understood? Johnson hesitated, just for a second. But Yuki saw it, saw him weighing his options. As a black soldier in a segregated army, he had limited power to push back against a white officer. But he was trying anyway. Sir, maintaining distance might damage the cooperative relationship we've built. The prisoners are helping with camp operations. They trust us. I don't care about their trust, Sergeant. I care about military discipline. You have your orders. Thompson left in his jeep. The dust from his departure hung in the air like a bad omen. That afternoon, the change was immediate and obvious. The soldiers maintained professional distance. Fitzgerald didn't joke during meals. Green didn't make small talk. Johnson explained the new rules through Yuki, his voice flat. The colonel says we must be more formal. No personal conversations. No extra food. No gifts. Just basic treatments required by regulations. The women understood. The kindness had been too good to last. This was the real America showing through. The propaganda had been right after all. The Americans had simply been playing a game. Except Yuki could see the soldiers' faces. They weren't happy about the new rules. Fitzgerald looked miserable. Green seemed angry. Even Johnson's professional mask couldn't hide his frustration. That evening, after dinner, Yuki was cleaning the mess hall alone. She heard voices outside. Moving to the window, she saw Johnson and Fitzgerald talking in low, urgent tones. "This is wrong," Fitzgerald was saying. "Those women aren't threats. They're terrified prisoners who are just starting to trust us." "I know," Johnson replied. "But Thompson outranks me. He can have me court-martialed if I disobey." "So we just follow orders, even when the orders are wrong?" "We follow orders, but we also find ways to do what's right within those orders." Fitzgerald was quiet for a moment. "Like what?" "Geneva Convention requires adequate food, medical care, safe housing. Doesn't specify quantities. Doesn't prohibit kindness, just excess. We can still treat them with dignity, just have to be more careful about it." Yuki moved away from the window, her heart pounding. They were risking their careers, potentially their freedom, to be kind to enemy prisoners. These men, these black American soldiers, who were themselves treated as second-class citizens in their own country, were choosing to fight for the dignity of Japanese women who'd been taught to hate them. The next morning, the new order prevailed. The soldiers were formal, distant, professional. But small things changed. Johnson started ensuring each woman received exactly the maximum ration allowed under Geneva Convention rules, not 1 grain of rice less. Green personally checked that every woman had adequate bedding, blankets, and supplies. Fitzgerald organized the work details to ensure no one was overworked. They had found their rebellion. It was quiet, invisible to Thompson, but profound in its impact. 3 days after Thompson's visit, Miyuki's dental wounds had healed enough for her to eat normally. She came to breakfast smiling for the first time since arrival. When Johnson performed the morning roll call, she bowed to him deeply. He didn't acknowledge it, couldn't with Thompson's rules in place. But Yuki saw his eyes, saw the slight nod, the tiny smile he couldn't quite suppress. That night, Yuki found Hanako crying quietly in her cot. "What's wrong?" Yuki asked. "I don't understand," Hanako whispered. "We were taught these men are inferior, subhuman, but they're risking their positions to be kind to us. They're treated poorly by their own country, but they still fight for it. For us. How can they be inferior when they have more honor than anyone I've ever known? Yuki had no answer. The question kept all of them awake at night. Their entire worldview was collapsing. Everything they believed about race, about America, about their own country's righteousness was being challenged by the simple, stubborn decency of Black American soldiers who refused to let hatred and prejudice define them. The transformation had begun with food and water. It had grown through chocolate and kindness. Now it was cemented by watching these men risk everything to maintain their humanity in the face of orders designed to strip it away. Yuki looked out the window at the guard tower where Private Green stood watch. He was protecting them. Still, despite Thompson's rules, despite the risk. The propaganda had been wrong about everything. These men weren't inferior. They weren't animals. They were the best people Yuki had ever known. And that realization, more than anything else, was what finally broke through the last of her hatred. She would never be the same. August 26, 1945, 7 in the morning. The camp had developed a rhythm. Wake at 6:30, roll call at 7, breakfast at 7:30, then work until the heat of midday drove everyone into the shade. Yuki had been working in the camp kitchen for a week now. The routine was comforting in its predictability. Peel vegetables, prepare rice, clean dishes. Simple tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind from wandering to dangerous places. Private Elijah Green worked alongside the prisoners most mornings. He was the quietest of the soldiers. Where Fitzgerald joked and Johnson commanded, Green simply worked. His presence was gentle, undemanding. He moved through the kitchen like a ghost, refilling water buckets, carrying heavy pots, helping without being asked. Miyuki had taken to him immediately. The older woman reminded Green of his own grandmother back in Alabama. She had the same way of moving, careful and deliberate. The same way of watching people, seeing beyond their words to what they really meant. This morning, Miyuki was teaching Green how to properly wash rice. She couldn't speak English. He couldn't speak Japanese, but they communicated anyway. Through gestures, through demonstration, through the universal language of shared work. Yuki watched them from across the kitchen. Green held the rice bowl exactly as Miyuki showed him, swirling the water, pouring it off, repeating until the water ran clear. When he got it right, Miyuki smiled and patted his arm. Green smiled back, a rare expression that transformed his usually somber face. "He's a good boy," Miyuki said to Yuki in Japanese. "Sad, though. Something heavy on his heart." Yuki had noticed it too. Green carried himself like a man who'd seen things he wished he could forget. Most of the soldiers did. The war had marked them all. That afternoon, during the break from work, Fitzgerald organized a makeshift baseball game in the compound. The soldiers on one side, the prisoners on the other. The rules had to be explained multiple times. Most of the women had never seen baseball. Hanako turned out to be surprisingly good at hitting. She connected with the ball on her third try, sending it sailing past Green into the outfield. The soldiers cheered. The women laughed. For a brief moment, nationality didn't matter. Yuki stood on the sidelines with Johnson, who was keeping score in a small notebook. "This is good," Johnson said, nodding toward the game. "This is what peace looks like." "It's strange," Yuki replied. "A month ago we were enemies. Now we're playing children's games together." "People are people," Johnson said simply. "War makes us forget that. Makes us see each other as uniforms and flags instead of human beings. But strip away the politics, and we're all the same, all wanting the same things. Safety, food,
a chance to laugh. That evening, the women gathered in their barracks for what had become an unofficial tradition: story time. Each night, someone would share a memory from before the war. Tonight was Tomoko's turn. The young woman spoke quietly about her home in Kyoto, about the cherry blossoms in spring, about her father's bookshop where she'd spent her childhood surrounded by stories. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said, her voice barely audible. "I wanted to show children that the world was bigger than they knew, that books could take you anywhere." "You can still do that," Yuki said, "when we go home, when Japan rebuilds." "If we go home," Keiko interjected. The older nurse still struggled with trust. "We don't know what will happen to us. We don't know if Japan even exists anymore." The question silenced everyone. They'd heard rumors. Tokyo burned, Hiroshima and Nagasaki destroyed by weapons beyond imagination. The emperor's voice on the radio, speaking words that seemed impossible. Surrender. Defeat. What was left to go home to? Private Green appeared in the doorway. He knocked softly on the frame, respecting their space. "Sergeant Johnson asks if anyone needs anything," he said through Yuki. "Extra blankets, medicine, anything at all." The women looked at each other. They had everything they needed, more than they needed. They had food, shelter, safety. They had kindness from people they'd been taught were incapable of it. "Tell him thank you," Miyuki said. "Tell him we are grateful." Green nodded and turned to leave. Then he paused. "Ma'am," he said to Miyuki, "my grandmother, she used to make something. Rice with beans. Comfort food, she called it. I was wondering if maybe you could show me how to make Japanese comfort food. The rice dish you mentioned yesterday." Miyuki's eyes filled with tears. She nodded quickly, unable to speak. After Green left, the women sat in silence. Finally, Hanako spoke. "They see us," she said. "Really see us. Not as enemies, not as prisoners. Just as people. It's more than that,"
Yuki replied, thinking of Johnson's words about his mother, thinking of Fitzgerald's chocolate, thinking of Green's gentle questions about rice. They're teaching us how to be human again. That night, lying in her cot, Yuki listened to the sounds of the camp, the distant hum of generators, the chirping of insects, the soft breathing of the women around her, and further away, the low voices of the soldiers on night watch, protecting them, guarding them, keeping them safe. The propaganda had taught her to hate these men, to fear them, to see them as less than human. But the propaganda had been wrong about everything. These black American soldiers were showing her what true strength looked like. Not violence, not domination, but compassion, patience, dignity. They were rewriting everything she thought she knew about the world. August 28th, 1945, 3 in the afternoon. The heat was unbearable. Yuki sat in the shade of the mess hall, fanning herself with a piece of cardboard. Corporal Fitzgerald found her there, carrying 2 bottles of Coca-Cola. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering her one. "Coldest thing I could find." The bottle was sweating with condensation. Yuki took it gratefully. The first sip was like drinking liquid ice, sweet and sharp and wonderful. Fitzgerald sat down nearby, maintaining the careful distance Thompson's rules required, but close enough to talk. "Can I ask you something?" Yuki said after a moment. "Shoot." "Why are you here? You and the others. Why did you join the army when America treats you so badly?" Fitzgerald was quiet for a long time. He took a drink from his bottle, watched the heat shimmer across the compound. "That's complicated," he said finally. "My daddy asked me the same thing when I enlisted. Said I was crazy to fight for a country that won't let me eat in half the restaurants, won't let me vote in my own state. Makes me sit in the back of the bus." "So why did you?" "Because someone has to be first," Fitzgerald said. "Someone has to prove we're equal, that we can fight as well as any white soldier, that we deserve respect. If I don't fight, nothing changes. If I do fight, maybe my kids will grow up in a better America." Yuki thought about that, about fighting for something you believed in even when that something didn't believe in you back. "Japan told us you were inferior," she said quietly. "They said black people were barely human. I believed them. I'm ashamed of that now." Fitzgerald nodded slowly. "America tells itself the same lies. Different words maybe, but same lies. That some people are worth more than others because of how they look. That skin color determines your value." "But you know it's not true." "Course it's not true. Anyone with eyes can see it's not true. But lies are comfortable. Truth is hard. People would rather believe comfortable lies than uncomfortable truth." They sat in silence, drinking their Coca-Colas. Around them, the camp went about its business. Women hanging laundry, soldiers checking perimeter fence, the ordinary rhythm of captivity. "I had a brother," Fitzgerald said suddenly. "Older than me, smart as hell. Wanted to be a doctor, but we didn't have money for medical school, and even if we did, most medical schools wouldn't take a black student." "What happened to him?" "Works in a factory. Good job, decent pay. But he could have been so much more." Fitzgerald's voice was tight. "That's what racism does. It wastes people. Takes someone who could cure diseases and puts them on an assembly line. Takes someone like Sergeant Johnson, who's the best leader I've ever known, and makes him fight twice as hard for half the recognition." Yuki understood. Japan had done the same thing, had told women their only value was in serving men, had told Koreans they were inferior, had built an entire empire on the lie that Japanese people were inherently superior to everyone else. "My father was a teacher," she said. "He taught literature at a university in Tokyo. But he questioned the war, asked why we needed to conquer China, why we needed to fight America. They arrested him, called him a traitor. I never saw him again." Fitzgerald looked at her with sudden understanding. "We've both been lied to. Yes, by our own countries. And now here we are, former enemies finding out we have more in common than we ever did with the people who sent us to fight each other." It was true. Yuki felt more kinship with these black American soldiers than she'd ever felt with Japanese military officers. These men understood what it meant to be treated as less than human. They understood the weight of prejudice, the exhaustion of constantly having to prove your worth. "Can I tell you something?" Fitzgerald said. "Something I probably shouldn't say?" Yuki nodded. "When they told us we'd be guarding Japanese prisoners, I was angry. Real angry. My cousin died at Pearl Harbor. My best friend from home got killed in the Philippines. I wanted to hate you. Wanted to make you suffer like we'd suffered." "What changed?" "I saw your faces when you got off that truck. You were terrified. Not angry or defiant, just scared, expecting us to hurt you. And I realized you'd been lied to, just like we'd been lied to. You weren't my enemy. You were just another victim of the same system that victimizes me. Yuki felt tears burning in her eyes. I wanted to hate you too. Was taught to hate you. But you gave me chocolate. You smiled. You treated me like a person. How could I hate someone who showed me kindness? That's the secret they don't want us to know, Fitzgerald said. That kindness is stronger than hatred. That if people from different sides actually talk to each other, actually see each other as human, wars become impossible. A whistle blew across the compound. End of break. Time to return to work. Fitzgerald stood, collecting their empty Coca-Cola bottles. Thank you for talking with me, he said. For being honest. Thank you for listening, Yuki replied. As she walked back to the kitchen, Yuki thought about Fitzgerald's words, about being first, about fighting for change even when change seemed impossible. These black soldiers were fighting two wars, one against Japan, another against the racism in their own country, and somehow they found the strength to be kind to their enemies while battling for dignity at home. That night, Yuki shared the conversation with Miyuki and Hanako. He's right, Hanako said. We were all victims. The Japanese government lied to us. The military used us. We thought we were superior, but we were just tools. So, what do we do now? Miyuki asked. We learn, Yuki said. We let them teach us. Not about how to be American, but about how to be human. How to treat people with dignity, regardless of who they are. These men are showing us a better way. Miyuki smiled sadly. Strange that it took becoming prisoners to finally be free. September 1st, 1945, 9 in the morning. The morning started with a scream. Yuki was in the kitchen when she heard it, a sharp cry of pain from somewhere near the barracks. She dropped the vegetables she'd been cutting and ran. One of the younger prisoners, a girl named Sachiko, had fallen from a ladder while trying to fix a loose roof tile. She lay in the dirt, clutching her ankle. The bone was clearly broken, the joint already swelling to twice its normal size. Private Green reached her first. He knelt beside Sachiko, speaking softly, even though she couldn't understand him. His hands were gentle as he examined the injury. The girl was crying, terrified. Don't move her, Johnson ordered, arriving seconds later. Green, get the medic. Yuki, tell her we're going to help. Tell her to stay still. Yuki translated quickly. Sachiko nodded through her tears. Green returned with the white doctor in less than 2 minutes. The medical examination was swift. The ankle was definitely broken. Clean break, the doctor said. Painful, but fixable. She'd need a cast. Weeks of recovery. We need to move her to the medical building, the doctor said. But we need a stretcher. Don't want to make the break worse. I'll carry her, Green said immediately. Johnson hesitated. Green, she's injured. Let's wait for the stretcher. By the time we get a stretcher set up and back here, she'll have been lying in the dirt for 20 minutes. I can carry her safe, I promise. Something in Green's voice made Johnson nod. Okay, but careful. Real careful. Green bent down beside Sachiko. He spoke to her through Yuki, explaining what he was going to do. Then, with movements so gentle they seemed impossible for someone his size, he lifted her. Sachiko gasped, but didn't scream. Green held her like she was made of glass, one arm under her shoulders, the other supporting her legs, careful to keep the broken ankle immobile. He stood slowly, adjusting his grip until she was secure. Then he walked. Not rushed, not slow, steady and careful. Yuki walked alongside, holding Sachiko's hand, speaking softly to keep her calm. The medical building was 200 yards away. Green made the journey without stopping, without jostling, without causing additional pain. When they arrived, he lowered Sachiko onto the examination table as carefully as he'd lifted her. "Good work, Private," the doctor said. "You've got gentle hands." Green stepped back, his face unreadable, but Yuki saw something in his eyes. Relief, and something deeper. Something that looked like old pain being soothed by present kindness. While the doctor set Sachiko's ankle and applied a cast, Yuki sat with Green in the hallway. "Thank you," she said, "for being so gentle with her." Green was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "My little sister broke her arm when she was 8, he said. Fell out of a tree. My daddy had to carry her to the hospital. But it was a colored hospital, miles away. The white hospital was 3 blocks from our house, but they wouldn't take her." "I'm sorry," Yuki said. She was crying the whole way. Every bump in the road hurt her. I watched my daddy carry her, and I swore if I ever got the chance to help someone hurt, I'd do it right. I'd be gentle. Yuki felt her throat tighten. This man, this black American soldier who'd faced prejudice his entire life, was still capable of such compassion. Still chose kindness even after experiencing cruelty. "Your sister?" Yuki asked. "Is she okay now?" "She's fine. Married now. 2 kids. But I never forgot that day. Never forgot how helpless we all felt because of the color of our skin." That afternoon, after Sachiko was resting comfortably with pain medication, several of the prisoners came to thank Green. They bowed to him, a sign of deep respect. Green looked uncomfortable with the attention, but accepted it graciously. Miyuki approached him with something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it to reveal a small origami crane she'd folded from paper Fitzgerald had given her. "For you," she said through Yuki. "In Japan, the crane is a symbol of healing and hope. You gave Sachiko both today." Green took the paper crane carefully. His hands, so large and rough, held it like it was precious. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said. "I'll keep this forever." That evening, Yuki found herself thinking about the soldiers' stories. Johnson's mother teaching him to treat everyone with dignity. Fitzgerald's brother, who should have been a doctor. Green's sister crying as she was carried past a hospital that wouldn't treat her. These men had every reason to be bitter, every reason to be cruel, every reason to show prisoners the same lack of compassion their own country had shown them. Instead, they chose mercy, chose kindness, chose to break the cycle of hatred. "They're better than us," Hanako said quietly from her cot. She'd been watching Green all day, watching how he checked on Sachiko every hour, how he made sure she had water and extra pillows. "Better than who?" Yuki asked. "Better than what we thought humans could be. We were raised to believe strength meant domination, that power meant making others fear you. But these men are showing us real strength. The strength to be kind when you could be cruel. The strength to help when you could hurt." Keiko, who'd been listening, finally spoke. "I lost my son to these people. My husband. My home. Everything I loved. I should hate them." "But you don't," Yuki said. "No, I don't. Because when I see Private Green carrying that girl, When I see Sergeant Johnson sitting with Miyuki during her surgery, when I see Corporal Fitzgerald trying to make us laugh, I realize they're not the enemy. They never were. The real enemy was the hatred we were taught, the lies we believed. Outside, the evening sun cast long shadows across the compound. Green was visible through the window, walking his evening patrol. He passed the medical building and paused, looking in through the window where Sachiko slept, checking on her, making sure she was okay. Yuki watched him walk away, the paper crane visible in his shirt pocket. These black American soldiers were teaching them something Japan had never taught. That true honor wasn't in dying for your country. It was in living with compassion, in treating every person, even your enemies, with dignity and respect. They were learning what it meant to be truly human. And the lesson was beautiful. September 4th, 1945. 4 a.m. Yuki woke to urgent whispers. Something was wrong. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. In the darkness, she could see several women clustered around Miyuki's cot. "Get Yuki," someone said. "Get the soldiers." Yuki rushed over. Miyuki was burning with fever. Her skin was hot to the touch, her breathing rapid and shallow. The older woman's eyes were open but unfocused, delirious. "How long has she been like this?" Yuki asked. "I don't know," Hanako said. "She was fine at dinner. I checked on her at midnight and she was sleeping. Now this." Yuki ran to the guard station. Private Green was on duty. He took one look at her face and grabbed his radio. "Medical emergency in the women's barracks. Need the doctor, now." The doctor arrived within minutes, still pulling on his uniform. Johnson came with him, alert despite the early hour. They rushed to Miyuki's side. The examination was quick and grim. Infection. The doctor wasn't sure from what. Maybe her dental surgery, though it had seemed to heal well. Maybe something else. But her fever was dangerously high, 104 degrees. Without treatment, she could die. "We need to get fluids in her," the doctor said. "Monitor her constantly. I'll start antibiotics, but honestly, at her age, with an infection this advanced..." He trailed off, but everyone understood. Miyuki might not survive. Johnson pulled Yuki aside. "Listen carefully. The doctor's going to do what he can. But camp regulations say I need permission from command to use certain medicines on prisoners, penicillin especially. It's reserved for American troops." "But she'll die without it," Yuki said. "I know. That's why I'm not asking for permission." Johnson's voice was steady, determined. "If Thompson finds out, I could be court-martialed. But I'm not watching this woman die because of paperwork." The next 6 hours were torture. The doctor administered penicillin, the miracle drug most Germans had only heard rumors about. He set up an IV drip for fluids. Johnson stayed by Miyuki's bedside the entire time, monitoring her fever, adjusting her blankets, speaking softly to her even though she couldn't hear him. Yuki translated Johnson's words during Miyuki's occasional moments of lucidity. "You're going to be okay," he kept saying. "Stay with us. Keep fighting." At one point, delirious with fever, Miyuki began speaking in Japanese. Yuki listened, her eyes filling with tears. "What's she saying?" Johnson asked. "She's talking to her daughter, the one who died in the Tokyo firebombing. She thinks she's there. She's apologizing for not protecting her." Johnson's jaw tightened. He reached out and took Miyuki's hand. "Tell her she's a good mother. Tell her she did everything she could. Tell her she's not alone." Yuki translated. Even in her delirium, Miyuki seemed to hear. Her breathing calmed slightly. By 10 in the morning, the fever hadn't broken. The doctor was losing hope. He pulled Johnson aside, speaking in low tones Yuki could barely hear. "Sergeant, I've done everything I can. If the fever doesn't break in the next few hours—" "It will break," Johnson said firmly. "It has to." He returned to Miyuki's side and stayed there. Didn't eat, didn't take a break, just sat, holding her hand, speaking softly. The other women gathered around. They brought cold compresses, offered prayers, told stories about Miyuki, the kind woman who'd shared her food, who'd comforted the younger prisoners, who'd reminded them all what grace looked like. Private Green arrived with something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. Fresh herbs, ginger root, things he'd found growing wild near the camp. "My grandmother used to make tea from these," he said, "when I was sick as a kid. Don't know if it'll help, but can't hurt." The doctor approved. Green made the tea himself, then carefully helped Miyuki drink it when she was conscious enough. The bitter liquid made her grimace, but she swallowed. At 2 in the afternoon, Colonel Thompson arrived for an inspection. He found Johnson still at Miyuki's bedside. Found the IV drip. Found the empty penicillin vials. His face went red. "Sergeant Johnson, step outside. Now." In the compound, Thompson's voice carried across the camp. "That penicillin was meant for American troops. You had no authority to use it on a prisoner." "Sir, she was dying." "That's not your concern. Your concern is following orders." "My orders are to oversee the care of prisoners. That's what I'm doing." "Your orders don't include wasting valuable medicine on enemy combatants. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get penicillin? How many American soldiers need it?" Johnson stood at attention, his face impassive. But Yuki, watching from the barracks doorway, could see the tension in his shoulders, the effort it took to remain calm. "Sir, with respect, that woman in there is somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother. She's sick and scared and far from home. I had medicine that could save her. I used it. If that's wrong, then I'll accept whatever punishment you decide. But I won't apologize for treating a human being like a human being." Thompson stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched. Finally, he spoke. "You're confined to quarters after this shift ends. I'll be filing a formal report. This conversation isn't over, Sergeant." Thompson left. Johnson returned to Miyuki's side without a word. At 6 in the evening, 12 hours after the crisis began, Miyuki's fever broke. The change was sudden and dramatic. Her skin cooled, her breathing steadied, her eyes opened, clear and focused for the first time since the fever started. "Where am I?" she asked weakly. "You're safe," Yuki said, crying openly. "You're going to be okay." Miyuki saw Johnson sitting beside her. Understanding dawned slowly. "You stayed," she said in Japanese. Yuki translated. "Course I stayed," Johnson replied. "Wasn't going to leave you." Miyuki reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were trembling but gentle. "Thank you," she said in English, the only English words she knew. "Thank you." That night, as Miyuki slept peacefully, Yuki found Johnson outside the barracks. He was sitting alone, staring at nothing. "You saved her life," Yuki said. "Maybe. Doctor did most of it." "You risked your career, maybe your freedom." Johnson shrugged. "Some things are more important than career." "Why?" Yuki asked. Why risk so much for an enemy prisoner? Johnson looked at her with tired eyes. Because that's what my mama taught me. You see someone suffering, you help. Don't matter who they are. Don't matter what uniform they wear. You help because that's what decent people do. Yuki sat down beside him. In Japan, we were taught that mercy was weakness, that compassion was for fools. Then Japan was wrong. Yes, Japan was wrong about many things. She paused. You're the bravest man I've ever known. Johnson laughed softly. I'm not brave. Brave would be easy. This is just trying to be human in a world that keeps telling you not to be. September 7th, 1945, 2 in the afternoon. Colonel Thompson returned. This time he brought another officer, a captain with military police insignia on his uniform. The entire camp went silent when they arrived. Johnson was summoned to the headquarters building. Fitzgerald and Green stood nearby, their faces grim. The women watched from the barracks, fear building in their chests. Yuki couldn't hear the conversation inside, but she could imagine it. Charges being read, Johnson's career being destroyed, all because he'd shown mercy. After an hour, the door opened. Johnson emerged first, his face unreadable. Then Thompson and the MP captain. The colonel called for everyone to assemble in the compound, soldiers and prisoners together. I called you here to address a serious breach of military protocol, Thompson began. His voice carried across the silent compound. Sergeant Johnson used restricted medication on a prisoner without authorization. This is a court-martial offense. Several women gasped. Yuki translated quickly for those who didn't understand. Thompson continued. However, after reviewing the circumstances and consulting with medical staff, I've decided to handle this matter differently. He turned to Johnson. Sergeant, you showed poor judgment in violating the chain of command. You should have requested permission before administering controlled substances. That said, your actions saved a life. A life that, according to the Geneva Conventions, we are obligated to preserve. Thompson paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. The United States military prides itself on treating prisoners humanely, on following international law even when our enemies don't. You upheld those values, even if you did so by breaking protocol. He took a breath. Therefore, I'm issuing a formal reprimand. It will go in your file. But there will be no court-martial. Relief swept through the camp. But Thompson wasn't finished. I want to be clear. This camp will continue to operate within regulations. Prisoners will receive proper care as required by the Geneva Conventions. Nothing more, nothing less. He looked at the assembled soldiers. But proper care includes medical treatment for life-threatening conditions. Is that understood? Yes, sir, Johnson said. Thompson's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your mother would be proud of you, Sergeant. Dismissed. As the assembly broke up, Fitzgerald clapped Johnson on the back. Thought for sure you were done. Me too, Johnson admitted. Thompson's not as bad as we thought, Green said quietly. No, he's just a man trying to do his job in an impossible situation. Same as us. That evening, the women organized something unprecedented. A thank you ceremony for the soldiers. They had nothing to give except their gratitude, but they made it count. Each woman stood and spoke through Yuki, sharing what the soldiers' kindness had meant to them. Sachiko, still on crutches, spoke about Green carrying her. He could have been rough, could have hurt me, but he was gentle, like I mattered. Tomoko talked about Fitzgerald's jokes and chocolate. He made me remember how to laugh. I thought I'd forgotten. Hanako shared how Johnson's leadership made her feel safe. I was waiting to die. He made me want to live. When it was Miyuki's turn, she struggled to stand. Johnson moved to help her, but she waved him off. She needed to do this herself. I hated Americans, she said through Yuki. Hated them because they killed my daughter. But Sergeant Johnson saved my life. He risked everything for me. An old woman. An enemy. Why? She looked directly at Johnson. Because he's a better person than I ever was. Because he believes in human dignity even when I didn't. I was wrong about Americans. I was wrong about black people. I was wrong about everything. Tears streamed down her face. Thank you for teaching this old woman what honor really means. Thank you for showing mercy when you could have shown revenge. Thank you for being the future I want to live to see. Johnson stood and walked to Miyuki. He bowed to her, a formal bow of respect. When he straightened, he was crying too. You were never my enemy, he said through Yuki. You were always just a person who needed help. That's all any of us are. Just people who need help sometimes. Fitzgerald pulled out his harmonica and began to play. A slow, beautiful melody that needed no translation. Green started singing, his voice deep and rich. The other soldiers joined in. The women didn't know the words, but they hummed along. For that moment, nationality dissolved. Race dissolved. Everything that divided them dissolved. They were just humans, sharing music, sharing gratitude, sharing hope. Colonel Thompson watched from a distance. He didn't join the gathering, but he didn't stop it either. He simply observed, his stern face thoughtful. Later, Yuki saw him speaking with Johnson privately. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw Thompson's hand on Johnson's shoulder, saw something like respect pass between them. The next morning, new orders arrived. The camp would continue operating under Johnson's command. Thompson was being reassigned to another facility. Before he left, he gathered the soldiers. I came here thinking discipline was the most important thing, he said. But you men taught me something. Taught me that compassion and discipline aren't opposites. That following the rules and doing what's right can be the same thing. He looked at Johnson. Lead well, Sergeant. These women are lucky to have you. After Thompson left, the camp felt different. Lighter. The tension that had hung over everyone since his first visit was gone. Yuki stood with the other women, watching the soldiers go about their day. These men who'd been taught they were inferior, who'd faced prejudice and hatred their entire lives, who chose kindness anyway, who risked everything to show mercy. We were enemies, Hanako said quietly. Now, I don't know what we are. Friends, Miyuki said simply. We're friends. And she was right. Against all logic, against all history, against everything they'd been taught, they had become friends. The war had ended, but something new was beginning. Something better. September 15th, 1945, 8 in the morning. The announcement came during breakfast. Red Cross officials would arrive within the week to begin processing repatriation. The Japanese women would be going home. The mess hall went silent. Yuki stopped eating, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Going home. The words should have brought joy, relief. Instead, they brought confusion and fear. What was home now? Tokyo was destroyed. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were gone. Japan itself was occupied by American forces. The country they'd left no longer existed. They'd be returning to a nation that had to rebuild everything from ashes. "You look troubled," Sergeant Johnson said, sitting down across from Yuki. "Thought you'd be happy about going home." "I don't know what I'm going back to," Yuki admitted. "My father might be dead. My city is rubble. Everything I knew is gone." Johnson nodded slowly. "That's the hardest part of war. Not the fighting. The after. When you have to figure out how to live in a world that's been broken." "How do you do it? How do you go back to normal?" "You don't," Johnson said simply. "You can't go back to who you were before. War changes you. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe you're supposed to be changed. Maybe that's how the world gets better." That afternoon, the women gathered to discuss their return. Some were eager to leave. Others were terrified. A few, like Keiko, had nothing to return to. No family. No home. "What will we tell people?" Hanako asked. "About this place. About the soldiers. The truth," Miyuki said firmly. "We'll tell them the truth. That we were treated with dignity and kindness by people we'd been taught to hate." "They won't believe us," Tomoko said. "They'll think we're traitors, collaborators." "Then we show them," Yuki said. "We show them through how we live, through how we treat others. We take what these men taught us and we use it to rebuild Japan. A better Japan. One that doesn't teach hatred." The conversation continued for hours. Plans were made, addresses exchanged, promises to stay in touch, though none of them knew if that would be possible. That evening, the soldiers organized a farewell gathering. Nothing formal, just people sitting together, sharing stories, trying to make the most of their remaining time. Fitzgerald played his harmonica. Green taught some of the women a simple American folk song. Johnson sat with Miyuki, both of them quiet, knowing their friendship would soon end. "I wish I could come to America," Miyuki said through Yuki. "See where you're from. Meet your mother who taught you such kindness." "Someday maybe you will," Johnson replied. "War's over. Things will change. Maybe not fast, but they'll change." Private Green approached Yuki with something in his hands. A small wooden box he'd carved himself during his off hours. Inside were letters, one for each of the women. "We wanted you to have something to remember us by," he said. "Not much, just words. But they're true words." Yuki opened the letter addressed to her. Johnson's handwriting was careful and clear. "Dear Yuki, you helped me remember why I became a soldier. Not to fight enemies, but to protect people. All people. You and the other women taught me that showing mercy to enemies takes more courage than showing them hate. Thank you for that lesson. I hope Japan treats you with the kindness you deserve. Respectfully, Sergeant Samuel Johnson." Tears blurred Yuki's vision. She looked up at Johnson, who was watching her with gentle eyes. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For seeing us as human when you could have seen us as enemies." "You were never enemies," Johnson said. "Just people caught in a war you didn't start." The next morning, Fitzgerald pulled Yuki aside. He had something to say, something he'd been holding back. "Listen," he started, then stopped, started again. "When you get home, things are going to be hard. People are going to be angry, broken. They're going to want someone to blame." "I know." "Don't let them make you hate again. Don't let them turn you back into who you were when you arrived here. You've changed. Stay changed. I will, Yuki promised. I'll remember what you taught me. What all of you taught me. Fitzgerald smiled. Good. Because the world needs people like you. People who've seen both sides. Who know that enemies can become friends. That hatred can become understanding. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in paper. Inside was a photograph. The soldiers and prisoners together during the baseball game. Smiling. Laughing. Human. Keep this, he said. When people tell you Americans are devils, when they say black people are inferior, show them this picture. Show them what really happened here. That night, Yuki couldn't sleep. She lay in her cot, listening to the familiar sounds of the camp, the generator humming, the guards changing shifts, the soft breathing of the women around her. In 3 days, she'd leave this place. Leave these men who'd shown her what true honor looked like. She'd return to a broken country that needed to learn the lessons she'd learned. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She'd arrived at this camp expecting death. Instead, she'd found life, purpose, a mission to carry forward. Tomorrow, she'd start preparing for that mission. Tonight, she'd simply be grateful for the impossible gift she'd been given. The gift of seeing her enemies as human, and in doing so, becoming more human herself. September 20th, 1945, 10 in the morning. The trucks would arrive at noon. The women had 3 hours left. Yuki stood in the compound watching soldiers and prisoners work together on one final project. A garden. A small one, just a patch of earth near the mess hall. But it would remain after they left, a living reminder that enemies had become friends here. Private Green showed the women how to plant seeds properly. Corporal Fitzgerald joked about his terrible gardening skills while somehow making perfect rows. Sergeant Johnson supervised with his usual calm authority, making sure everyone had what they needed. "This will grow," Johnson said, gesturing to the freshly planted ground. "Long after you're gone, this will be here. Flowers and vegetables, growing from ground that prisoners and soldiers tended together. That means something." Yuki knelt in the dirt, pressing seeds into the earth. Beside her, Miyuki did the same. Their hands, one young and one old, both Japanese, working alongside American hands. Black hands that propaganda had told them were inferior, but had proven to be the most capable and compassionate hands Yuki had ever known. "What will you do when you get home?" Miyuki asked. "I'll teach," Yuki said, "like my father wanted to. I'll teach children that people are people, that skin color doesn't determine worth, that kindness is stronger than hatred. They'll call you a traitor. Maybe, but I'll be telling the truth. And eventually, truth wins." Hanako joined them, carrying water for the newly planted seeds. "I'm going to write about this," she said. "Everything that happened here, the kindness, the transformation. People need to know." "Write it honestly," Johnson said, overhearing. "Don't make us heroes. We're just men trying to do right. Write about how we all started as enemies and ended as friends. That's the real story." At 11 o'clock, the women cleaned up. They washed the dirt from their hands, changed into the clothes they'd arrived in, now clean and mended by soldier hands, gathered their few possessions. The Red Cross officials arrived early. They seemed surprised by what they found. Prisoners and soldiers talking like friends. No tension, no fear, just people saying goodbye. "This is unusual," one official commented to Johnson. "Most camps have clear separation between prisoners and guards."
Most camps are missing the point, Johnson replied. War's over. These women aren't enemies anymore. They're people going home. We treated them accordingly. The official made notes, but said nothing more. At 11:30, the women lined up for final roll call, not because regulations required it, but because they wanted one last moment of structure, one last moment of being part of this strange, beautiful community they'd built. Johnson called each name. Each woman answered. When he finished, he stood at attention and saluted them. Not a mocking salute, but a genuine one. Respect offered freely. The women bowed in return. A deep bow, the kind reserved for honored teachers and respected elders. Then the informal goodbyes began. Hugs that would have been impossible weeks ago. Tears from soldiers and prisoners alike. Promises to write, though everyone knew mail between Japan and America would be difficult. Fitzgerald gave each woman a piece of chocolate. For the journey, he said. His voice was thick with emotion. Green handed out the origami cranes the women had taught him to fold, each one carefully crafted during his night shifts.
A piece of Japanese culture offered back by American hands. Miyuki embraced Johnson, the sergeant who'd saved her life, who'd risked his career for her. She spoke in Japanese, and Yuki translated one final time. You showed me that hope still exists in this broken world, that goodness survives even in war. I will remember you until I die, and I will teach my grandchildren, if I'm blessed to have them, about the Black American soldier who proved that honor has no color. Johnson's voice cracked when he responded. You reminded me why compassion matters, why we can't let hate win, even when hate seems easier. Thank you for that gift. At noon, the trucks arrived. The women climbed aboard, moving slowly, reluctant to leave. Yuki was the last one up. She paused at the tailgate and turned back. Johnson, Fitzgerald, and Green stood together, watching. 3 Black American soldiers who'd changed everything. Yuki walked back to them. She extended her hand to Fitzgerald first. He took it, his large hand gentle around hers. Thank you, she said, for the chocolate, for the laughter, for showing me joy still exists. She turned to Green, took his hand. Thank you for your gentleness, for proving that strength and kindness aren't opposites. Finally, Johnson. She took both his hands in hers. Thank you for everything, for your courage, your compassion, your unwavering humanity. You saved more than lives here. You saved souls. Johnson pulled her into a brief hug. Go build a better Japan, he whispered. Make this mean something. I will, Yuki promised. I swear I will. She climbed into the truck. The engine started. As they pulled away, Yuki looked back through the canvas opening. The 3 soldiers stood at attention, saluting. Behind them, the garden they'd planted together. Seeds that would grow into flowers, into food, into living proof that transformation was possible. The camp disappeared from view, but the lessons learned there would never disappear. They'd been planted deeper than any seed, in hearts that had been hardened by propaganda and softened by kindness, in minds that had been closed by hatred and opened by compassion. Yuki touched the photograph in her pocket, the letters in her bag, the memories in her heart. She was going home to a broken country, but she wasn't broken anymore. She'd been rebuilt
by the impossible kindness of men she'd been taught to hate. The truck rolled on through the Pacific sun. Inside, 48 Japanese women sat in silence. Each one changed. Each one carrying the same mission: to take the lessons learned from Black American soldiers and use them to build a better future. They'd arrived as prisoners of war. They were leaving as ambassadors of peace. The transformation was complete. The propaganda had been destroyed, not by force, but by the simple, revolutionary act of treating enemies like human beings. In the end, that was what changed the world. Not weapons, not speeches, but ordinary people choosing
Extraordinary kindness. Black American soldiers showing mercy when they could have shown hatred. Japanese women accepting that mercy and letting it transform them. The war was over. The real work of peace was just beginning. And somewhere in an American camp in the Pacific, a garden was growing. Seeds planted by former enemies, proof that hope survives, that humanity endures, that love, in the end, is stronger than hate. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.